Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stage Door Show. I'm Dave Hondel. Tonight, we have with us a talented actor, producer, and also stunt choreographer. We want to get into his career and also some of his projects, which includes popular Cobra Kai franchise. So let's bring him in now. Kris D. Roberts, welcome to the show, man.
Hi, Dave. I appreciate you having me on this evening.
It's an honor to have you on, Kris. I want to start because we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but I actually saw an interview with you that you gave, and it really kind of, made the wheels turn in my head a little bit because we talk about this a lot on my show. But there was a couple projects that you were involved with at one point as an actor, and you had a job that, a contract job that you were working, and you had to get the time off to do these jobs. But somebody one of the projects kind of wanted you to go do a fitting in Miami, but it would have kind of been a hardship for your work. And so you had to turn them down. Can you talk about that a little bit? And the reason why is because I think there's a lot of actors out there that think if they're going to be an actor, that they don't have to have a job, or that they're just going to be taken care of. And that's just not the case. In fact, there are a lot of actors out there, professional working actors that are in big productions, big movies and whatnot, and they have day jobs. So talk about that situation. And, because I want to get real with my listeners right now.
I was fortunate to have a job as a subcontractor. Well, I was a contractor, basically. I worked for a vehicle dealership, detailing vehicles, and I had just booked Atlanta, and I had cleared a whole week off my calendar, which technically, as a contractor, I'm my boss. But you obviously want to keep a good relationship with the job you have. I booked the role in Atlanta, which is 5 hours away from where I work at Tomlinson Motors in Gainesville, Florida. And they, like I said, and there was phone issues that morning, if you could imagine. The towers were interrupted, and I was getting messages, but I couldn't respond to these messages. And they were coming from my agent out of Miami, Florida. So, and then all of a sudden, I got a text message from the casting director himself of Bad Boys 4 asking me if I could be in Miami that afternoon. It's like 10 o'clock, and I had just thanked the boss, and, I was doing extra duty, if you will, to kind of show my appreciation. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the invite came to be a stand-in on Bad Boys 4. And I was floored. I didn't know what to do, Dave. All of a sudden, the experience I had gained up until then told me the thing to do was to stay committed to my initial obligation, which was with Cobra Kai. Because the moral of the story is that after everything my job did for me, it would have kind of been like a slap to the face to them to just up and leave my job that afternoon to travel 5 hours to Miami. And that was the irony. One film was 5 hours away, and the series was 5 hours the opposite way that I was already committed to. And, I kicked myself in the tail, but again, I think I made the right decision at that point. My agent in Miami told me it was kind of a last minute thing. They understood. I apologized personally. I sent a message to the casting director, basically, begging his pardon, if you will, and maybe we could try again in the future.
I think that's a great story, and and doing the right thing like that. You don't burn any bridges. And especially not only just with your job, but also with potential casting director might call you in the future, right? So I think that was good that you actually reached out and said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I normally would, but this is why." And I think you have to respect that.
It was certainly a bittersweet experience, Dave, but looking in hindsight, it was a blessing.
I think being in a franchise like Cobra Kai, I mean it's a big production, and productions like that obviously are physical. There's a lot of physicality to those, and I know you've done some stunt choreography in the past, and so talk about I think jobs like that, and I've spoken to stunt people, I've spoken to stunt coordinators on sets of movies that I've been an extra in, and I think that a job like that, if you have that kind of skill set as a stunt, stunt man, stunt coordinator, I mean, there's got to be a lot of work out there or future work, because I think it's a small community. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the stunt world has kind of a niche where there's a small community of people, and there's a lot of people that work on kind of the same projects together. Yeah. So is that something you thought of, to have that skill set, and is that going to help you, I guess, in this film world?
The fighting arts are definitely obviously an in-demand trade for the film industry. I've worked with stunt guys that I've watched. I met them. They told me they were in a film. I went home and watched the film, and it had always been. And I mentioned before we started recording about how my classmate in grade school, his uncle did stunt work for Chuck Norris. So it was always something. And I played football in third grade. I've been a rough and tough kid. So yeah, in fact, on Cobra Kai, one of the stunt players for Team France was 68 years old. So, the yeah, to answer the question, I believe working with the stunt community. In fact, I'm fortunate to be an honorary inductee member of Meticulous Martial Arts Mastermind, which is a fight group that is organized by a close friend of mine, Juanita Cap. After my involvement in Cobra Kai, I was invited to be an honorary inductee as a film ambassador, and there's numerous other, larger name people that have experience in the film and in the fight industry, the fighting combat sports. For instance, I worked with Yuli Diaz, Yuli the Monster Diaz, fastest knockout, in history. Like, just being exposed to the people and watching the fight sequences on set of Cobra Kai, it inspired me to plug back into, my experiences with Tai Chi. I have a great uncle who was a professional boxer in the 20s. I heard stories about this, in my family's military. So we're a rough and tough group, we're not afraid to get our hands dirty, and we believe in hard work. We believe in being professional, respectful. I was raised by a military father. So, of course, the whole stunt thing, it's always just been a thing. I grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzard. It's always been something that has intrigued me. And, I've only been in the industry pursuant. I like to call myself a working actor, whether I'm working for cold pizza and warm soda or it's a nice size check. I like to look at myself as a working actor. And again, with only 5 years in the industry, I feel I'm at a point now, because when I was in Florida the past 5 years, I did whatever it took to get on a film set. I didn't have to have a big part. I just wanted to be there.
Just wanted to see how it all works.
Sure.
Yeah.
The nuts and bolts. And I had, in 2019, that was my very first film opportunity ever. It was a background role for a Netflix production in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sweet girl. Had privilege to meet Jason Momoa. I was enthralled, Dave.
Got the bug.
Yeah, I came back home, and from there I moved to Florida. I was like, whatever, I'm going to Florida to make movies. I still joke about it with my coworkers, which the job I left 5 years ago, they were gracious to have me back on, for this next stage of endeavoring.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. One of the things that we talk about also is, do you need to move to LA or New York? But you're kind of in a good, and I'll tell you that when I did music videos, the majority of my work was in Central Florida. Almost all of my music videos were shot, either at Full Sail Backlot or the locations around Orlando. I mean, I think we shot one in Tampa as well. So we had a lot of work in that area. So I think folks that might listen to, the advice where you got to move to LA or you got to move to New York. And I've always been an opponent of that. I've always said, look, I say you don't have to move. You can work where you are, but look at Atlanta is what 4 hours from you, 5 hours, whatever, not that far, right? So there's opportunities around there. Atlanta is one of the hubs of filmmaking. North Carolina is still making films. It's not a far drive to New York if you have to go to New York, or even a plane flight to wherever. So I think that there's a lot to be said to just stay where you are if that's where you're comfortable staying, and that's where you're making a living. I don't think you have to live in LA to make it in the industry. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so either now, Dave, especially in hindsight. I mean, I'm an auto detailer by trade, so I can basically work anywhere I go. I could have work. And that was because when I made the move from Pennsylvania, it was during COVID. It was shortly after COVID that I decided I'm a good auto detailer. There's really nice cars in Florida. There's films being made in Florida. I said, this sounds like a win-win. So lo and behold, I get to Florida and I took on the work. Uh, Saying that to say, I mean, I was a bit eccentric with it, I guess, Dave. It was an extreme thing, but it ended up paying off. And uh, I don't see it as a necessity to move to the areas. You can, I've networked. I got people that wouldn't mind seeing me come do work in Scotland. But
Yeah,
I'm not going to move to Scotland.
right.
If, maybe that'll, you know, kind of you can move to Atlanta. I venture to say that, and I've thought about it. I have thought about this because when I moved from Fort Myers is where I originally moved when I moved to Florida this past time. From there, I moved to Tampa because that's where the work was. My film mentor was there, the person that gave me my first professional headshots, Annette Day. Thank you very much. Um, I just put myself where the work was, and I just continued to aim. I looked toward Atlanta, and I was thinking to myself, well, I want to move to Atlanta, and then all of a sudden, an opportunity arose for me to move to Gainesville, Florida, which granted isn't it's still 5 hours from Atlanta, but in my mind, I was 5 hours closer, and that's what I told myself, Dave, and it sounded absolutely insane.
Yeah,
It's like, I'd say it to people, but in my heart, I wasn't really feeling it.
right.
But I spoke it. This is what I'm trying to do. I get to Gainesville. I spend a year in Gainesville, networking, traveling for film. I put 50,000 miles on my car in 2 years traveling to film gigs.
Yeah, and I was going to
You know,
mention, you have a military family. You're from a military family, and moving around is like second nature. I mean, that's something that is part of the DNA of somebody in the military. So did that help? You had to make your decision to move.
well, I was born after my father did most of his worldly travels and such. And however, the moving around thing is relevant to my situation because from a young age, from the broken home, we've lived with numerous family members. I've lived with aunts and uncles, grandma and grandpas. But even looking back, because see, there's a whole nother show to unpack some of the stuff that I've been through in my earlier years, as far as my struggles, what I've overcome. A lot of my traumatic response during those years before all the healing took place was fight or flight.
Hmm.
So it was always in my DNA to not necessarily almost be like a gypsy,
Yeah,
to travel, like a hunter gatherer, which is what I was ironically raised to be
sure.
or raised by. We grew our own gardens, we'd hunt, we'd fish. Anyway, long story short, hunter gatherers would move to where the opportunity was and they wouldn't think twice or they'd die. we're quite the we're a bunch of hillbillies, I guess, man. I mean, I've been on Cobra Kai when I was in third and fourth grade. My dad would wake me up at 3 a.m. and we'd go check trap lines, and I'd split firewood to heat our house. So thankful for the wholesome upbringing I had because it reeled me back in from all the. But just saying that to say, I was never afraid to take a leap of faith, man.
One of the things I was going to ask you, with Cobra Kai and is, the stunts and that type of thing, so when did you learn, are you into martial arts, or is that something that you learned at a young age? And because like I said, that's a skill not a lot of people have, especially in the film industry. So how did you get to be to that level as far as, being martial arts and making it to, these movies?
Well, I wasn't on the stunt team with Cobra Kai. So basically my martial arts skills are at a novice level. However, I study Tai Chi. I am a self practitioner. I'll be dusting stuff off and I'll spend time in the living room, doing forms and such. I go to the gym 3 nights a week. I'm not some fantastic martial artist, but I can roll, if you will.
Sure, of course. I mean, that's an important, like I said, important skill set, and one that I think would be, useful in any film. To be honest with you, if there's any kind of action in it. The other thing is, what do you, Kris? What do you want to do in your career? I mean, now that you've been in it 5 years and you kind of got a taste of it, you've been in some big productions, so you know how it works on a set. What is it? What's the next step for you? What's the next level that you want to achieve in this industry?
I'd like to begin to investigate the Northeast market, even over into Detroit, Chicago. I would like to get plugged into this area. I met a lot of incredible people in the Southern film industry, the Florida film industry, Georgia film industry. And I come back home to rural hometown, it's been phenomenal, a reunion with family, friends, what have you. But I'm reaching now. I'm trying to get into the Pittsburgh market. I'm trying to, I'd go sweep manure in a parade scene to be on Law and Order. I guess what's next for me, Dave, is just working on my craft, continuing to network, and just one day at a time. That's all this has ever been about, Dave. I'm on no mission to get on any certain thing. I want to enjoy this industry, and I want to be creative and allow that side, that talent that I have to whether it be discovered or somebody, helping me through instruction, classes, just continuing to work on my craft, Dave, and continuing to network and see where, someone may see me as a good fit, and I'd be glad to help out.
Have you ever done any theater? I was going to ask you that. Have you done theater?
I went to a small theater, and to answer your question, no, I did audition for a theater role one time. It just so happened to be a musical. The casting director, bless her soul, she was like 80 years old, and she loved me. She loved what I brought to the table. But when they started dancing, Dave, I kind of really had to excuse myself.
It's a different world, right? It's not a dramatic role.
It was incredible, but it just wasn't for me. But a dramatic role, I'm not above. I would love some experience in theater. I know a lot of actors have had the privilege to, and I can't even begin to understand how much of a transition it probably is going from a stage actor to a film actor.
But and there's a difference for sure. But I think one of the best training anybody can get as an actor is a theater. In Orlando, not far from Gainesville, a couple hours. They have one of the best theaters anywhere in the country. In fact, it's renowned, the Orlando Repertory Theater, and they have productions all the time. And I our family's been through through years of training there. And I can tell you that a lot of people have come out of that repertory theater and have done some pretty big things. Mandy Moore being one of them. So there's a lot of different things that people can do at those types of theaters and community theaters. You know, just a lot of community theater work is really good because when you learn stage acting, you're learning improv, you're learning things. When you forget your lines, what do you gotta do? The show must go on. So what do you do? So and you're getting immediate reaction from the audience. And I think as an actor, I mean, it's great training for that. And it certainly is a different type of acting, acting in front of a camera versus acting on the stage. But it's a good foundation for any actor to go through to that training. But again, what kind of advice do you have for somebody that's just getting started and wants to take the same path you did? Now that you're 5 years in, what kind of advice can you give somebody?
The advice I think that best served me was to just keep going. There's gonna be ups, there's gonna be downs. It's financial. Just continue doing, and it goes back to life in general. Just give 110% to the best of your ability every day. I became very self-aware, and I learned to, I journal a lot, so I write a lot about things. Get a support system. You're going to need it, and often I found support systems in the film family. Because everybody has real lives. Everybody has bills to pay. Everybody, just get you a network, get plugged in. Suit up and show up, have a good attitude, be professional, and cut yourself some slack. Like we talked about earlier, casting directors see thousands of people. You're not going to get every role. Please be aware of scams. Please, please, please. It's getting ridiculous, Dave. I got a screenshot. Sam Elliott sent me a picture with an index card that says, Chris Roberts, I'm a real person. These guys, they're getting slick. I encourage you to find somebody in the industry that can help you along your way and just stay positive and have a good time. You're going to meet a lot of amazing people. You're going to have a lot of amazing experiences, and, the sky's the limit. Not to sound cliche, but sky's the limit.
Yeah, just got to work hard and have that passion. It's the one thing that, at work I teach leadership, and I teach people to try to get to the next level, and one of the things that I always tell everybody is you can't teach passion, and you can't teach accountability, and you can't teach responsibility. So it's something you either you have already, or you have to realize it and understand that that's one of the most important things that you can take with you, is to have that passion for what you do, no matter what it is, whether it's acting, whether it's, your job, or whether it's, taking care of your children, or whatever it is. You got to have that passion for it. Because if you don't, that's when people become complacent, I believe. And, complacency, it will kill all kinds of careers. And so that's my advice for those out there listening. So what do you want your legacy to be, Chris? What do you want to leave behind when it's all said and done?
Well, that's what I'm 48 years old, and this is a lot of this has been about self-actualization. So I just want people to maybe someday crack a book and see something and be like, man, that guy really turned his life around, and he decided to live life. So am I going to get it perfect every day? No, but that's the goal.
That is good. I'm always trying to improve, every day. There's something that before we leave, there's something I wanted to talk about. There's a Secret Society. I know you just finished part 3, Secrets of the film Secret Society Part 3. But talk about that franchise and what people can be excited about out there, our listeners, because I know you just wrapped that up, correct?
Well, Secret Society 3 was a couple years ago. It's on all the major platforms. It was a project I was called upon, part two. I came in on part two as a disabled prison inmate. Traveled from Fort Myers to Miami to film that, but it was a great experience. Got to work with Jeremy Meeks, Mayasha Productions, Secret Society 3. Went back to work on Secret Society 3 after we had wrapped 2. They called me back a year later and invited me back. It was an honor. I wasn't expecting the phone call. It just kind of came out of the blue. In fact, I was donating plasma in Gainesville, Florida, when I got a text message asking me to come to set in Miami, and I was kind of elated. But the significance, and not to burn time, but the biggest significance about that experience was I worked with Jeremy Meeks, and on part two, I asked him when professionally, I asked him if he had any advice for me as a young actor. And he said a lot of the things we spoke about this evening, and I took his advice, Dave. And lo and behold, within the next 18 months, I had been on 3 projects with that man that gave me that advice. Just showing a living testament that I took what he said, I applied it, and every time I seen him, it was kind of like a reunion. I was like,
Yeah.
So thank you, Jeremy Meeks. Thank you, Mayasha Productions, for having Kris D. Roberts on your production.
Well, Kris, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. It's been a nice conversation, and I know you reached out to me to do this, and that's another thing, advice to people out there that are actors, and you got to market yourself. You got to put yourself out there. You got to take a chance and reach out to these podcasts and reach out to these, these local news stations. Cause look, they're always looking for content, and, it's one thing to put yourself out there. And the nice thing now is that everything lives on social media forever, so you can, do a show that'll live for years and years, and people can Google you and see all these different interviews. That's how I helped prepare for this one. I was able to watch a bunch of your interviews that you've done in the past. So that's one of the things that people that are listening should be doing all the time. You got to market yourself, because nobody's going to do it for you, especially as an indie actor. You got to be out there and put yourself out there. So again, just do what you got to do to get your name out there and tell your story, because nobody's going to tell it for you. So, so again, thanks for reaching out to me, Kris, and hopefully we'll have you back soon to talk about the next big project that you're working on.
I have a good metaphor along the lines of what we were just saying, Dave, and it's, if you want to get into the kingdom, you're going to have to knock on palace doors.
Absolutely, 100%. But again, thank you so much, Kris, and my best to you in your future works. And again, can't wait to see where your career goes.
Thanks for having me on, Dave Hondel, and I appreciate everybody that'll tune in and watch. You can follow me on all the social medias, Kris D. Roberts with a K. Anywhere you look, except for on Broadway, that's another Kris D. Roberts.
I see Kris D. Roberts 1. There's a 1 at the end on your Instagram. Is that right?
Correct.
So if you want to follow him on Instagram, which I encourage everybody to do, it's Kris with a K, Kris D. Roberts 1. So definitely follow him on all the platforms. And again, thanks again, Kris, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Dave. You as well.